Okay, welcome to today's UTIA webinar. We'll be starting shortly. Amin,
Okay.
who's going to be your moderator, will be introducing our speaker today. Thank you for being here.
Hello, everybody. How is everybody doing? I know we have a lot of people here, some from the state of Utah, which is 104 right now. I know also there are other people from other states and some other people from other countries as well. I think it's 104 here. With no further ado, let's welcome everybody. So hello and welcome all. My name is Amin El-Fajri. Obviously, people who know me, I'm Amin, not Carlos, as the screen states. I couldn't know how to change my name, but anyway, I'm Amin. Thank you for being with us today. A diverse group of translators, interpreters, and language professionals from the state of Utah, surrounding states, and other parts of the world. Just a brief introduction about our role here at the UTIA, the Utah Translators and Interpreters Association. We are a group of working interpreters and translators in the state of Utah. Our goal here is to advance and elevate the quality and availability of language services in Utah, and work for the development of our profession as interpreters or translators as well. We do educational meetings once a month. Please check our website for further information. Our website is utianet.org. Regarding this today, interpretation industry between illusion and reality. This webinar has been approved for 1 hour and a half CEUs, continuing education units, by the UTIA state courts. Also was approved by 1 hour and a half by the CEAP and CCHI for the certified medical interpreters as well. 1.5 hour also by the RID, the ASL, also approved, and other approvals as well. So without further ado, let me welcome and introduce our distinguished speaker today, Ms. Dina Rashad. She's also known as the linguist. Dina Rashad is an Egyptian. She's actually presenting from Egypt today. She's a simultaneous interpreter for Nile TV International. It's a channel, and she does live broadcasting for that channel with the Nile News sector. She is an English official presidency interpreter for the president of Egypt sometimes. Moreover, she is a trainer, and she was actually the first one, and I had the chance to be in her training. She was the first one to conduct an online simultaneous course during this pandemic, the COVID-19. Ms. Dina Rashad, I want to welcome you to our association. And just before I hand it to my our distinguished presenter, I just want to say that everybody will be muted just for the purpose of this webinar, and also that you will get certificates of attendance. We will tell you how to get those at the end. Concerning questions, comments as well, or even concerns if you have any. So please type in your questions, since everybody will be muted. Just type in your questions in the box, chat box, and we do have other moderators here, Carlos and Ingrid as well. So we will ask those questions on your behalf at the end. And Ms. Dina Rashad, without any further ado, the floor is yours.
Hello, Amin. Thank you so much for that great introduction. Hello, Carlos. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for attending to our webinar, and thank you so much, Amina, and thank you so much for having such a great opportunity to be with you today. I just want to double check that you hear me well before going any further.
Yes, we do.
We can
Please.
hear you well.
All right.
But if you're
Perfect.
sharing your screen, Dina, we're still not seeing the screen, just in case.
Oh, you're not seeing the screen.
Oh, yes, we are. Sorry. My apologies.
Oh, all right. No worries. Okay, so yeah, so just as you Amin mentioned, that it's all about the being Egyptian simultaneous interpreter, mainly for the live broadcasting for the Egyptian presidency for the Egyptian national TV, Nile news sector, and the Nile TV International, along with other international conferences. I'm certified conference interpreter that have got lots of freelancing, interpreting for different international and UN organizations. And as you mentioned as well, I was so lucky to have you in my in one of my classes that I started to get the simultaneous interpretation courses amid COVID-19. So stating that, that's why today our webinar will be having, I think that's going to be having some special taste as a practitioner. So as you all can see that the title maybe can tell it all, that interpretation industry between illusion and reality. So stating that, just let's start and see what are the main objectives of today's webinar, or what are the learning objectives that we will go through. If you can see the screen, those are the main learning objectives, maybe like 5 or 3 main objectives. But I would like to ask at the very beginning, just before going into these, if we have a specific specific specialized interpreters in the attendees. I mean, how many interpreters that we have, and if we have interpreters, are you medical interpreters? Are you court interpreters? If we can do the poll and see exactly who we have here, so we can get more acquainted together. So, I mean, if you could help, or maybe Carlos.
Yes.
Yeah, so far we have so far about 30%, 40% have voted. It looks like so far about 70% have marked medical, about 37% court, about 40% conference, and 19% media. I think the poll is allowing people to select more than one if they
Yeah.
participate in more than one. So we're at 71% voting. Let's give it a few more seconds and see. Give it a chance. We're at 80%. We should have a background music here. Okay, we're at about 83% voting, Dina. So we'll be closing
Perfect.
then in about 5, 4, 3, 2. Okay, so we have about 65% participate in the medical interpreting field, about 32% do court, about 42% do conference interpreting, and 23% media interpreting.
Oh, wow, amazing. That's very interesting, very interesting. So yeah, to have, multiple expertise, that's really gonna make it quite interesting. Okay, so best of luck to everyone. So let's get into the first slide. The first slide. So these are the objectives that we will talk about. So we will just talk about mainly the illusory thoughts about interpretation industry, and we will go through some main challenges in different moods of interpretation, and then we will talk about some tips and tricks of how to maneuver those challenges, and then we will also talk about some highly recommended does and don'ts, and then we will have a specific slide on the media interpretation secrets as a spotlight. So let's start with the first slide. So the illusory thoughts versus reality. So it is very common that anyone outside the circle or the community of interpreters may have some thoughts or some beliefs which is actually not real. So I've tried to maybe gather some of those commonly thoughts and put them into points and then we can review them and see what is real and what is not real. So the first thing, which maybe most of you have faced, that people think that any bilingual person can conduct interpretation. And for sure, this is not real, because the bilingual person, he's someone who's able to conduct or to express himself in two different languages. However, he's not maybe able to convey messages between two different speakers or more than two speakers. So the interpreter should be a bilingual person, but a bilingual person not necessarily be an interpreter. So the interpreter is someone who's bilingual and he's able to convey messages from and to, right? But being bilingual does not necessarily mean that you're able to do interpretation. So this is number one. Number two, one of the common thoughts as well, stating that any interpreter can do translation and that any translator can also do interpretation. And actually, this is not real. Again, because translation and interpretation, they are totally different domains. People sometimes misunderstand and think that they are just the same thing, but definitely they are not. The techniques, the strategies, the requirements, the skills are totally different. The interpreter is someone deals with the spoken speech, and the translator is someone dealing with the written context. The interpreter is someone who's just doing the job on his own. He does not have the luxury of search engines or any sort of like memo queues or cat tools or any other sort of helping tools. While the translator is someone does have the luxury of time to get the optimal context translator, and also he does have this luxury of tools that he can use and use the search engines to get things done in the perfect manner. So stating this, the interpreter, with all of his qualifications and expertise, not necessarily be able to do translation. And the same thing for the translator. The translator is not necessarily able to convey or to conduct interpretation, especially because the translator just more or like most commonly, he's just dealing with one direction of the process, but the interpreter should be bi-directional. So the interpreter should be able to interpret from and into the source and the target language, but the translator not necessarily be required to do it into like the bi-directional process. So stating this is very important, because maybe some of the organizers or some of the recruiters or some of the clients, maybe they choose their the service provider when they would like to have, for example, an event or a conference, and they start to find someone to conduct the interpretation services. They sometimes go and seek a translator to do it, and they think that because he is a translator, so he can do it. But actually, this is not the case. So that's why it's very important to make full differentiation between both domains. And then also one of the other common illusionary thoughts, which is stating that interpreters can actually do the interpretation in any given domain. And as all of you actually know, that we have lots of domains, and being an interpreter does not mean that you're able to do interpretation in any sort of field or any sort of domain. So if you are a medical interpreter, sometimes you're not going to be able to do it in a court mode. And if you are a conference interpreter, maybe you're not going to be able to do it in a medical mode, and so on and so forth. And then one of the other thoughts, which is stating that interpretation is a word-for-word translation, or in another word, interpretation is a literal translation. And this is absolutely not correct, because simply if interpretation is a word-for-word translation, so your audience would understand nothing, because sometimes the source and the target language have totally different structure, complexity. So if you listen to a word and then you start to make it like a word translation, your audience will understand nothing. But actually the interpretation is all about thoughts. So it's not about words. It's rather about thoughts. And in another word, we say it as thought unit. So actually your mind receives set of thoughts, and then your mind start to comprehend those thoughts, and then your mind start to deconstruct this thought and this structure, and then try to reparaphrase it into another sort of structure, which is your target language. So this complex process was never ever been a word-for-word translation. So it's rather thought unit process. And then one of the other illusionary thoughts about interpretation, that interpretation, it just mainly revolves around the memorization and the linguistic skill. So stating this, we would say that yes, memorization and linguistic skills are absolutely fundamental assets for being an interpreter, but they are not just the only things. I mean, you should have this, absolutely, but you do have additional requirements and additional skills and additional qualifications on top of this that can qualify you to be an interpreter. So it's just not merely being able to memorize and just not being having the linguistic skills and awareness. And then going to the second slide, we're still continuing with the illusionary thoughts versus reality. This is one of the very important thoughts which has started to be commonly spread, which is the machine translation or technology in another way. So machine translation that can replace interpreters. And maybe we all have faced this, especially during the COVID-19 pandemic, when things starts to change and the new normal starts to get into the remote simultaneous interpretation. People start to think that maybe one day the artificial intelligence or the digitalization or the technology revolution can just replace interpreters. But actually, still, this is not real. What is real is, yes, technology is there, revolutions is there, artificial intelligence is there, but again, if the interpreters could be split into two groups, group of which that can embrace technology and another group which is like traditional interpreters, we can say that those who embrace technology can replace both, can replace the traditional interpreters and the machine translation. And why is that? Is actually, again, because as we mentioned, that the interpretation process is very complex. It's just not about even conveying messages and conveying thoughts. It has lots of other features like the facial gesture. You convey the facial gesture, the body language, the tone of the speaker, the intonation, the mood, the emotion. So no matter how technology will be, still cannot convey it as the well-equipped or well-embraced technology interpreters can do. And then another thought will be the following one, which is stating that interpreters only interpret into their A language, or in other words, into their mother tongue language. Maybe this is the case, or this is the standard situation, for example, in the UN, that they most commonly just interpret into their A language. But as we mentioned a while ago, that being an interpreter, being a competent interpreter, you should be able to do bi-directional process. You should be able to interpret into your A as well as into your B and even into your C if you have a third language. All right. Amin or Carlos, could you confirm that you hear me well?
Yes, indeed.
All right, thank you. Perfect. Right, so continue with the illusory thoughts versus reality. Here comes this very common thought, which is that once you say interpretation, everyone would think that, oh yeah, you mean simultaneous? Oh, by the way, is it simultaneous or simultaneous? I mean, can you remember that question? So some people say simultaneous, some people say simultaneous. So it is both actually, simultaneous and simultaneous. That's in American and the British language. I'm sorry, the American and the British accent. So anyway, so once you say interpretation, people may think that you just mean simultaneous, but actually this is not the case. Interpretation does have lots of modes and modalities, and we will take a look on that later on in another slide. So again, interpretation is just not one mode, it's more than that, okay? Maybe also one of the other common misunderstanding of the interpretation industry, that RSI or remote simultaneous interpretation has become more easier and it's even more secured and maybe even be more effective than the F2F or the face-to-face interpretation process. And this is one of the issues that we now as interpreters try to make it clear to our clients, and we try to educate our clients with the reality of the remote simultaneous interpretation, that it is no easier for interpreters. It is not easier because it does have lots of other burdens on our shoulders. We're not just concerned with the interpretation process and the workflow, that's it, but we also take care of the setting, the technicality, all of the technician requirements. We do it as interpreters, and the liability here is even way harder, because if we got any issues with the internet connection or with the setting itself, or maybe with the room that you are sitting in, if you have like a background noise, if you have got some of the attendees just all of a sudden just to get out from the meeting for some technicality reasons, so all of those things cause lots of insecurity, and sometimes even you could be hacked while you are online, and it's not as effective as the face-to-face interpretation, because the face-to-face interpretation, like in the conference mode, allows people to have communication, to have physical communication, to get open discussions, and maybe it can also lead to further development and further meetings and further success. So RSI is the new normal. However, we should pay attention that it's not as equal as F2F in terms of effectiveness, security, and competence. And then going to the following thought, we see that also people sometimes think that interpreters, they are just like machines, so they can interpret for hours continuously with no pauses. And again, absolutely, this is not the case. So as you know, interpreters does have capacity for their stamina. So it is recommended, as we all may know, that it is recommended not to exceed 20 minutes of continuous interpretation. And after that, you as interpreter should pause for a while and get your break for your mind, and then you can resume back your interpretation process. But the clients or the recruiters or the end users, maybe they are not aware of this, so we need to educate them well with this and let them know how it is very dangerous if we would just get the interpreters to do this process for like 1 hour, for example, or 2 hours continuously. This may cause harm to their mental health and their brain capacity. All right, sounds brilliant. Then we get to maybe the last two illusionary thoughts in that slide, which is that interpreters should be, or they are, academic linguists. And maybe, as I just said at the very beginning, that I'm one of the practitioners. So interpreters could be academic linguists, but also we do have a set of practitioner interpreters who are not necessarily be academic linguists, or maybe they can be both. So I am actually, I am academic linguist and I am a practitioner, but I mean, some other colleagues that I know, they haven't even gone into any sort of those studies at all, but they are very professional practitioners, interpreters. And last but not least, one of the common illusory thoughts about interpretation as well, that interpreters do interpret better into their A language. And this point is very interesting to myself because it has very long debate through ages. We do have different theories here. We do have the classic theory and the modern theory. And me as Dina, I believe in the modern theory, which is stating the contrary, which is interpreters do interpret better into their B language, not their A. So some people may agree on this and some people may agree on that. At the end of the day, you know, this is just one of the very long debate concepts. And from my own point of view, why do I see that interpreters do interpret better into their B language? That's simply because, as we mentioned a while ago, that interpretation is all about the understanding or the full comprehension of a given thought unit. So once your mind receives that thought unit, you can start build up your you know your interpretation. So you can imagine, for example, if you're listening to a speaker and that speaker, he speaks in your or like he speaks in another language than your mother tongue. For example, in my case, I'm English Arabic interpreter. So let's say that the speaker speaks in English, all right, which is my B language, and he just started to use some sort of whatever acronyms or idioms or some sort of jokes that I did not understand. How would I convey this into my mother tongue? That would be very challenging, yeah? However, if we do it in the other way, if the speaker speaks in Arabic, which is my mother tongue, no matter what he would say, I would definitely understand it. And once I understand it, I can then use my own language for the B language and just put it into that target language. So this is why I see that interpreters can do better into their B language, not their A language. So that's for the first objective of today's webinar. Hopefully you enjoyed that. Right, so stating this, now let's talk about what are the pre-qualifications required for someone to be an interpreter. So as you can see here in that slide, those are the main fundamental pre-qualifications for anyone to start to say, you know what, I can be an interpreter. So the first thing is the memory enhancement. You should be having memory enhancement like on like daily routine in your life. And you should have very strong short-term memory because interpretation is all about the short-term memory. Also, it is very important that you should be able to have this skill of linking the words according to the context. As you know, for example, in English, lots of words, or maybe even all of, you know, majority of words can have multiple meanings according to the context. So for you to be able to use each meaning separately according to the linking context, this ability is very fundamental pre-qualification for you to be an interpreter. Also, for sure, the listening skills. And when we say listening skills, we're not just talking about listening to music or listening to songs or listening to news and that's it. No, actually, the listening skills in our industry is totally different from just the general listening, because you listen not just for the sake of listening, but you listen for the sake of analyzing. So you listen, you understand, you keep the data into your mind, and then you start to do the interpretation process. And for sure, the context comprehension. Because if you're just listening, right, but you cannot understand, you cannot comprehend, so how would you do it? So again, one of the main fundamental pre-qualifications that you should be able to have context comprehension. And for sure, the speaking skills. And as we said a while ago, that a translator, for example, he is not required to have the speaking skills. But for you as an interpreter, this is the you know, fundamental asset in your skills package. So you should be having very good speaking skills, and for sure, phonetics mastering. You should be aware of the phonology. You should be aware of the articulation of sounds. You should be aware of the voiced and the voiceless sounds, the consonant, the vowels, sounds, and all of that, all of those things. And also, as we reconfirm again that on the bidirectional capability, because sometimes people would say that, okay, I will just do interpret into my A or into my B. And then sometimes you find that the speaker actually use both languages during his speech. So what would you do? Right? So you cannot guarantee 100% that your task or your assignment will be just having one single direction all the way long. So you should be very well competent in delivering the interpretation in both directions at the same level. And definitely being intercultural, you should be very knowledgeable. You should be very updated with the news in the service. Otherwise, you wouldn't be able to, deal with the challenges that we usually face. Not be flexible with going, among different topics and domains in one go. And definitely the master of all, being self-confident. Interpreter is all about being confident. Once you start to lose your confidence, despite all of the other qualifications that you may have, but once you start to feel shaken or to have the self-confidence just disappear, you will pause, you will stop. And once you stop, you start to lose the flow. And once you start to lose the flow, you start to lose your competency. So being self-confident is an absolute fundamental pre-qualification to be an interpreter. All right, so stating that, we would like to know what are the different types and moods of interpretation. As we said in the first slide, that some people may assume that once we say interpretation, this would definitely mean simultaneous interpretation. But actually, as you may see here, that simultaneous is just one of the types of the interpretation. But we have also consecutive, we have whispered, or sometimes it's called chuchotage, and also we have relay and we have liaison. And those types of interpretation, they do have multiple modes that they can be conducted in. So that could be done through the conference mode, judicial mode, escort, public sector, medical, sign language, and media. And as maybe you can see here in that slide, this shows you the different modes and modality. So for example, the relay. So the relay happens when we have more than 2 languages. So for example, we have group of English interpreters, group of Arabic interpreters, and group of Russian interpreters. So in that case, we have more than one language. So this will be conveyed in the relay. So each group will interpret into their target language, and then the second group will get from their target language, which is going to be their own source language in that case, and then they interpret it into their target language, which is going to be the source language to the third group, and so on and so forth. It's like a circle, right? And then the liaison. The liaison, just what happens when you have 2 speakers, and you as an interpreter, you convey from this one to the other and from that one to the other. And also it could be more than 2 people. Simultaneous, for sure, we are all aware of it. It happens when you just interpret immediately at the same exact second that your speakers speak. And then the consecutive, which absolutely also you know about, which is the interpretation that happens just right away after your speaker pause. Then you start to convey what he was saying, either sentence by sentence or maybe like some few minutes, whatever you will agree on. And then the last one, which is the whispered. The whispered could be conducted either simultaneously or consecutively. And it happens just between 2 speakers, not more than that. Okay. Oh, sorry, missed that one. All right, so Here we go. So stating the different interpretation moods and modalities, now we will focus on those three main types of interpretation. We will see what sort of challenges that we actually have, and after stating those challenges, we will see how we can overcome them, or how can we confront them, or what are the tips and tricks that we can use to get it sorted. So as you can see in that slide, the first one is the simultaneous interpretation. When we talk about the challenges that we face as simultaneous interpreters, we may divide it into those points. The first thing will be challenges related to the language itself. And this will cover lots of things. That could be lexical challenges, could be phonetic challenges, any sort of language barriers, could be jargons, could be idioms, could be jokes, could be proverbs. So anything related to the language that you can imagine, starting from being a lexical into being a proverb, we as simultaneous interpreters face challenges into it. Amin? Amin, are you there? Carlos?
Yes, we're here. We can hear you.
Hear you.
Yeah, all right. Just because there was like echo, so I just wanted to double check. Right, thank you guys. So yeah, getting back to the challenges that we face as simultaneous interpreters. As we said, that the first thing is the language related challenges, as we mentioned, you know, those sort of things. And then comes the memory related issues. And you know, this is very hectic and very cognitive energy that we exert to keep our memory alert and awake all the way long, to be able to grasp the information or the ideas, and like keep it into our mind and just start to put it right away into the other language. And then also we face challenges related to the speaker, and this could be lots of things. If the speaker, for example, he's not a native speaker of that language. So for example, he's an Arab speaker, but he decided that he will make his speech in English, but he's not a native speaker. So that's why you can imagine what sort of challenges that you may face. So that could be linguistic issues, that could be pitch style. For example, if he speaks so fast, or if he speaks so slow, or if he is so monotonic, or even worst case scenario, if his sentences are incomplete. And this is actually very hectic. And again, we will see how we can, you know, try to overcome such situations. Other issues or other challenges that we face as simultaneous interpreters come beyond the technical related issues. Technical related issues that would be, you know, the setting itself. Sometimes we as interpreters, this is very common, that sometimes we just forgot even to just activate our setting, or just to press on the floor so we can listen to the floor. Sometimes we forgot to just unmute ourselves. Sometimes we just forget to press on the proper key for the relay so we can listen to our colleagues in the other room and get the relay from them. So those sort of technical issues are also existing every now and then. And then the fourth, or maybe the fifth part of challenges that we face will be related to the context itself. And this could be either that you're interpreting a domain that you haven't been experienced before, or something new to you, you're not very well trained in it. Or it could be culture diversity. So you're interpreting something which is contradicting to your own beliefs and traditions. and stuff like that, because for sure you're having interculture, so there is diversity in the culture and the backgrounds. So some interpreters, even when some interpreters, when they feel or they find that the event or the conference will be tackling some sort of topics or fields which are contradicting to their beliefs, they refuse to get in there. But again, this is not how it is, because being an interpreter, you should be very impartial and just get yourself out of the situation, and you're just, you know, the shadow of the speaker, and you get yourself not involved at all. But again, this is actually very challenging and it's not easy. Right, so that's for the simultaneous mode. For the consecutive, we will have maybe the same exact thing with the simultaneous, but we will have additional challenges. So as you can see, we will have the same thing in terms of the language related challenges, and also the same thing for the speaker related challenges. But we will add an additional challenge, which is the presentation skills, because being a consecutive interpreter, sometimes you will be having the stage, you'll be on the stage, so you need to have these diplomatic presentation skills, right? And this is not easy. You need to be trained very well. And also an additional challenge will be the note taking. And for sure, if we will talk about note taking, that will take us, you know, like maybe a full day. So note taking is very hectic and it's not easy. And also one of the additional challenges in the consecutive mode is the pitch length. So if you haven't made it clear before starting your invitation with your client or with your speaker, that you will just say one paragraph and then I can just go ahead and interpret it, and then you go to the second paragraph and so on and so forth. If you haven't set rules from the very beginning, he may just keep, you know, speaking for a very quite long time, and then you will be required to see or to say exactly what he was saying, and this will be very, very hard, and not sure actually that any interpreter can make sure that he will convey exactly what's being said. Lots of things will be missed, absolutely. Also, the context diversity is also one of the same exact challenge that we faced in the simultaneous, also will be in the consecutive. But we have additional two other challenges in the consecutive interpretation, like when we have different speakers and each speaker has his own interpreter. So this will be, you know, very confusing, and we may have even overlapping quite often. That each speaker speaks and then he waits for the other one to interpret to, you know, and this interpreter waits for the interpreter to convey. Interpreters themselves may have different, you know, interpretation styles and techniques that may cause lots of confusion. So this is also one of the very hectic challenges. One last thing in the consecutive interpretation is the awkward situations. Like this happens mainly in you know, very sensitive fields, like for example in the refugees or the asylum seeker communities. Sometimes when you find that the speaker tells you as an interpreter, you know what, just do not interpret what I'm going to say now. So just do not tell them what I will say now and stuff like that. So it happens, and unfortunately some junior interpreters may adhere to that and they just stop and do not interpret. But again, this is not how it should be done. So if this gonna be the situation, you should just tell and inform the speaker that if you do not want me to interpret it, just do not say it, because I am here to interpret each and every single thing that you're gonna say. Other than that, you can just stop and not say it. But again, not all interpreters, or actually especially the junior interpreters, maybe they won't be brave enough or courage enough to say that. And then the last one in the schedule is the whispered, and the whispered will be having both of simultaneous and consecutive challenges, both of them. But even on top of this, it will be having the repetition potentiality that your speaker couldn't hear you because actually you're whispering. So he would just pause and say, sorry, could you repeat that? Sorry, what did you say? No, I'm sorry, I didn't catch that. And so on and so forth. So you will start to repeat your interpretation. And while you're doing this repetition, the other speaker would have just said something else. So you just missed all about it. And here comes the confusion. So also, as we said, the other challenges that we mentioned in the simultaneous and the consecutive would be exactly the same as they are in the whispered interpretation. So after having this view for the challenges that we face as interpreters in those different modes and modalities, how can we smartly enough deal with it, or what are the kind of techniques or what are the tips and tricks that we may use somehow to help us to get the process done professionally and at the same time make sure that we haven't missed anything. So I would say that the first thing that we can do is to have smart skip. So the smart skip means that you as an interpreter should be smart enough to know what is that thing that you can skip and it wouldn't make any impact or it wouldn't affect the message at all, but still you can skip it just to save time and to take your breath and to save some power and to save some cognitive energy in your mind. And this is very applicable in Arabic language because in Arabic language we do have lots of redundancy. So in English, for example, the sentences are very just short and very precise. But in Arabic, we may just say, you know, the same exact idea, but we will keep repeating and just put in lots of adjectives, lots of adverbs, just to, you know, get the sentence very complex. But at the end of the day, you just added no extra value or no extra meaning to it. So in that case, we should be smart enough to know what are those redundancy that we can skip and just get the interpretation done. The second tip that we can do is to have ignorance with inclusiveness. What we mean by this, like for example, if we have a sentence having those kind of words, jeers and violence, and your mind, while you're interpreting, so your mind just didn't hear jeers, or actually heard it but couldn't be able to remember the exact meaning, but actually you just focused on violence. So jeers and violence could be more inclusive. So you can just go ahead and interpret the word violence, and that will be covering the general meaning of jeers and violence. And then the third tip will be to get closer to the meaning. Like for example, if we would say that there was a file spilled into Syria, for example, your mind couldn't be able to get it done very quickly in less than a second, and it just visualized the situation that there was fighting in Syria. So you decided to interpret it in that way, that there was fighting in Syria. What you have done here is that you just got closer to the meaning. So yes, you can do this as a tip. And then also you can use the filtering technique. The filtering technique is most commonly used with the names of ministries and countries. So for example, when we say the Minister of Scientific Technology and Communication, actually your mind couldn't be able to, you know, get the whole thing together and just put it in that way, the Minister of Technology. So it is the same exact person, and people would understand that it is the same exact entity, the same exact authority, the same exact ministry. Same thing apply, for example, when we say the Arab Republic of Egypt, and your mind just started not to be able to say, you know, the whole phrase. So you can just say Egypt, or for example, the United Kingdom of Britain, you can just say UK or Britain, and so on and so forth. Okay. Also, one of the other tricks and tips that we use is using the alternatives. Um, so alternatives like synonyms, in another word. I mean, for example, you've heard the word collateral damage. Collateral damage, you just also, because while you're interpreting, maybe sometimes your mind just stop and you just start to forget about very simple wordings even. So what you do instead is that you try to get an alternative to that meaning that you know that it means something like that, but you cannot get the exact word. So what you can do is just you can get into the easiest alternative for you. So instead of interpreting collateral damage, you can just say a lot of damage, and that's it. All right. And then another tip and trick that we can use is the transliteration. And this is very applicable with the names of organizations. I can remember that we were having very interesting discussion, me and my colleagues, about the interpretation of the word deep state. And we've got lots of different point of views and different styles in interpreting that exact term. But one of the very interesting ideas that I've heard in that discussion was to use the transliteration at the beginning, in case if you're not aware of what is a deep state, if that's like the first time for you to hear the word. So what you can do is just to say it exactly as it is, which is the transliteration. So you would say deep state, exactly as you just heard it, deep state. And then you can just, paraphrase or elaborate what does that mean in the target language. But transliteration is also one of the tips that we use on a very, very limited mood, but specifically with the names of the organizations that we haven't heard about before, or that we're not very quite sure of what they are. And then also one of the very nice tips, which is the cliches. Like the introduction, like the the welcoming of the presidents or of the diplomatic leaders, the integration of any sort of events. There are like set of cliché that you should just, as an interpreter, try to keep them off by heart, just to save time and to give your mind peace and to save your breath for the further or for the rest of the speech. So just to, like, for example, His Excellency or His Eminence or His Majesty, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests or distinguished attendees, blah, blah, blah. So all of sort of those cliches, you can just be very well aware of them, just to save some sort of time to your mind to take sort of break for just a while till you get the rest of the conference flow. And also one of the other tips that we may use is to repeat or to re-paraphrase. I actually do not do this myself, but I found that there are interpreters that they do it, and it is effective sometimes, especially when you got no other workaround to do. So, for example, you're interpreting and you started to get tired and your stamina started to be shaken, and you heard something and you just forgot about it, or you've no clue exactly what it is, and there's no way for there's no way even to ask for repetition or something like that. So what you can do instead, or actually what the interpreters sometimes do, is that they try to repeat a sentence, or they repeat a piece of information that they just said a while ago, but they say it in a different way, just to make sure that the listener or the audience or the attendees do not lose concentration. And after a while, if there is a break or something, they can just get to the speaker and try to make sure exactly what this point that was missed. And then he can tell the speaker that if he can just repeat that point again in the next session, because he wasn't able to convey it in the first place. All right. Also, continuing with the tips and tricks, we come to the abbreviations and the acronyms. So using the use of the acronyms and the abbreviation also is very helpful, and it saves time, especially if you're talking about commonly used abbreviations and acronyms. So like, for example, Sustainable Development Goals. So instead of just saying Sustainable Development Goals, just say SDGs, and it's already known. Also DGDP, just to save time and to save energy as well. Maybe the last thing that I'd like to talk about in that slide is the figurative language workaround. The figures and the numbers is one of the things that cause horror, I would say, to most of interpreters, especially if we're talking about very complex numbers with high values and ratios and percentages and stuff like that. So for example, if you're an interpreter and you just found the speaker saying 57,360, what the hell? So you just forgot about it and you couldn't manage to write it down even in a piece of paper. And for some reason, your booth mate just left you in that specific time and he just went to whatever, have, sort of like a quick break. So you couldn't manage to write it down or to have your colleague helping you to tell you what the number was. So what you can do here, one of the workarounds that I do is I just state the value. So I would, for example, say, instead of saying 57,367, I would just say thousands of hundreds, or I would say approximately 50,000 and 300, something like that. So I would say approximately, I just put the general value, or I just say the main value without getting into the short fragments or the ones and tens in between. And if I'm lucky enough and that figure was mentioned while a presentation, so the audience can actually see that there's a presentation on the screen and they can see the slides. So I can just, refer them to the slides. So I would say that approximately the figure is blah, blah, blah. And if you want to get the accurate figure, you can just get back to slide number such and such on page number such and such. All right. So that, yeah, so that's for the kind of tips and tricks that you can use, and that will help you quite a lot to, to move or actually to overcome the challenges that we mentioned a while ago. So far so good, Amin or Carlos?
Yes, I think there was a comment saying that some of these don't necessarily apply to court interpreting as much as it does to community interpreting.
Yeah, that's right. So we're just stating, the common thing that like the main umbrella. So yeah, some of them will be applicable and some of them won't be applicable. So we're just stating all of the things that could be applicable to this and that, because we're not talking about certain specialty today. We're talking about, the experience in general. And even for the court interpreters or for the medical interpreters or for any other specialty that we have, it's very important for you to know how things happen in other domains, because maybe one day later on, you may change your, domain and just go to another one. So it's very interesting to be aware of how things happen or how you can maneuver those challenges.
Great. And Mohammed also commented, I do sometimes ask or sign them to slow down, but the sad reality is that some speakers have 3 to 4 pages to read pages to read out in 5 minutes and they ignore you. Therefore, I tend to summarize and keep the core message, but I like to be able to convey the whole message, especially when statistics are involved. The same is true for simultaneous interpreting. I know some colleagues just say the speaker is talking too fast and the interpreters can possibly keep up and then just turn off the mic. I personally think that's not okay. What do you think?
Oh, this is absolutely not acceptable by any means. No way. I mean, no way. You can even imagine that if the speaker, speaks so fast and even to make it worse, he speaks a sentence in Arabic and a sentence in English, a sentence in French and a sentence in English, and get back to Arabic. And this, by the way, this is very applicable and it happens in reality. But under no circumstances should you just stop and close your mic. This is not acceptable by any means. What you can do instead is, and this is one of the things that we will just talk about right now, which is the preparation. If you could just take a look now on that slide, which is the do's and the don'ts. The first thing that I mentioned is the preparation. Now for you, if you are going to any sort of assignment or task, the first thing that you ask for is the keynote or the domain or the timetable or the speakers or the title, you know, or the what we call it, the main ideas or the slides or the presentation. I mean, you try to get all of the questions beforehand and try to get all of the documents that you could have before even accepting the assignment or the task. And once you get this, try to do the preparation very, very precisely. And you get to the speakers and try to search for their speakers on YouTube and try to find if they have previous speeches, and get those speeches and try to listen to it and try to do shadowing, not interpreting. Try to do shadowing just to make sure that you're following on their pace and that you're able to, you know, go with their flow, and then you can try to do the interpretation. This is one of the things. So preparation pays. Preparation always pays off. And also the teamwork. So if he just said something and you forgot about it, here comes the role of your booth mate. That's why we usually say that the booth mates should stay together and then they just leave together. It's very recommended not just to leave your booth mate in his shift and just, you know, walk away, because sometimes he would need your help and your assistance, and for sure you as well. And at the end of the day, you are just one team. So you work as a one team and you will get your evaluation as a team at the end of the day. So under no circumstances you should just, you know, switch off your mic. And let's say that it's even not recommended, by the way. I've never stopped and asked the speaker to slow down, to be honest, even if I had that chance before, because it's not his, I mean, it's not his, you know, it's not his issue that I am not able to follow with him. This should be one of my own skills. I should train myself well, right? Worst case scenario, if I am not going to be able to get all of what he's saying, this is the worst case scenario. So what I would be able to do is to have this, you know, quick and smart technique to be fully alert and try to trigger what he was trying to say, what are the main ideas, and just put it in the perfect way. All right. So hopefully that answered that question. And continuing in that slide, as you can see in the dose, that it's very important to go early to your conference or to your venue in general. Very important to go early, because sometimes when you go early, you will have the chance to meet some of their speakers, and then you try to like build rapport with them, have sort of like, you know, get acquainted together, introduce yourself. Maybe even you can try to have a kind of a keynote. If you haven't got it before, you can get it from them, or like kind of manual from them that will help you. And even you can set with them some rules that if you could just please make sure that you will have your speech in just one you know, one single language, either Arabic or English, or either French or English. I mean, just to make sure that he won't mix languages. So that's why it is highly recommended to go early to your venue. Also, we highly recommend to double check your sound system and your setting before starting, to yourself and also to your booth mate. Even if your booth mate hasn't arrived yet, you can just do that for him as well, because maybe he will just come, you know, on time and he wouldn't be able to do the testing himself. And as we said, at the end of the day, the evaluation will be to the whole team, not to you in person. And as we said, that you should adhere to the ethics, no matter what. And what we were just talking about now, or like a while ago, is actually one of the effects that under no circumstances should you just switch off your mic, or just like, you know, leave your colleague and just get out to have like cup of coffee or whatever. Yeah, so you should stay with your partner or with your colleague and try to help him at your best. Also, we do recommend that at the very beginning, you know, just before the speakers start, to introduce yourself and to introduce your partner or your colleague, and also to introduce the code of conduct in both of your languages, the A and B languages. This is very professional. And as we mentioned, to cooperate with your teammate, and also very important to have a sort of documentation and to have a glossary library to each and every single event that you do. And for sure, it's highly recommended to imitate your speaker. You imitate his style, you imitate his pace, you imitate his tone, his mood, his facial gesture, and all of that, because this will add huge difference to your productivity comparing to if you're not imitating him. And for sure, this is a level of proficiency. It's not easy, but it's a very high high level of proficiency, and it pays off as well. So you should try to train yourself to imitate the speaker as much as you can. And
Dina,
for sure,
I'm sorry to
yeah.
interrupt you. There is a question here. Somebody's asking what to do when your partner doesn't respect your beforehand agreement to stick to such and such minutes and carries on for longer than you agree with that person.
Yeah, this is very common, actually. Thank you so much for that question. This is very common, and that's why it's very important to have, even if that colleague, like it's the first time for you to meet him, or you know him off by heart, whatever the situation is, it's very recommended that before starting and before commencing your task, you should agree together. Hey, whoever, we would do 1, 2, 3, 4. Those are the rules. Those are the ethics. If he agreed to this, that's fine. If he does not agree, then we can see another workaround. So maybe, for example, I would tell him, you know what, we could just shift after 30 minutes. But he would say, no, I'm sorry, I don't agree in this. I would rather prefer to make it like a speaker by speaker. So I would interpret for the first speaker, regardless how long his speech will take, and you will just interpret for the second speaker, regardless how long that will take. If we agree on this, then that's fine. If we do not agree in this, so we should find a common ground. At the end of the day, if I found any sort of, disrespect from him, or any sort of like he's not adhering to the ethics, by the end of my conference or by the end of my task, I should report this to our supervisor if we have supervisor, or I should report it right away to the one in charge, the recruiter or the organizer, and so on. And while the interpretation process just going on, I wouldn't do anything rather than staying calm and keep my confidence, regardless what's happening, regardless what he's gonna do, regardless any sort of disturbance. I would just keep myself confident, alert, and calm, and adhere to the ethics as much as I can. Hopefully I've answered that question. Thank you so much indeed. Right, so the other column, which is the don'ts, the things that we should not do. Omission and addition. So we should neither omit something, nor should we add something. We should actually just interpret everything that's being said, even if it is repeated, because I've noticed that with some of the interpreters, that when they find that the speaker just keep repeating the same exact point more than once, they started to get, you know what, I just said it once, so I'm not going to say it again. But actually, no, as long as you've heard it, you should do it. But you can just shrinkage the idea. So rather than saying it in like 5 words, you can just do it in like 3 words. So just to save time and to give yourself kind of pause, or like kind of taking breath in. But at the end of the day, you should not just decide to skip something because you just decided not to say it. You should, get yourself out of this. You're not the decision maker at all. You're just the shadow of the speaker. You do not pose unless he poses, and you do not speak unless he speaks. The second thing, which is the NDA violation. Under no circumstances this should happen. Under no circumstances. As long as you've agreed on NDA, so you cannot violate it by any means. This is very, very, very important. And in case if you do not have NDA agreement, still you should stay adhering to the confidentiality ethics, because I mean, for example, we were having discussion the other day that you do not have NDA with your client, and your client even hasn't asked you to do any sort of a specific confidentiality. It's something very public and everyone can get into it. Even if that is the case, you still should get back to him and make sure or confirm with them that, again, there is no confidentiality required in that specific event. And once he tells you, yes, there is nothing here confidential, then you can take it from there. So it's very important to stick to confidentiality and not to violate NDA under no circumstances. As we mentioned, not to leave your booth while your mate is taking the shift. This is not professional at all. And this would absolutely would affect your reputation, because if your colleague just, mentioned that to your organizer, and for sure, as long as you've done that with one of your colleagues, or actually he's done that to you, so absolutely he has done it to other colleagues, so he starts to have, a reputation in that regards, and that will affect his career path negatively. Also, one of the very important things, which is to apologize. I mean, now I've accepted to go to that certain task, and I will do it. And then just before the event, like, with one night or maybe 2 days, whatever, I just decided that I'm not gonna go because I do have whatever urgent situation or urgent matter, and I had to apologize. This should not happen at all. All right, you should keep your word, and you should get to your venue, you should get to your assignment and get it done. But if we're talking about really severe and urgent situations and you would have to apologize, then do not apologize unless you do have another one in the same exact level of expertise like yourself to replace you. So in that case, you will contact your organizer and apologize and tell him, you know what, I just had not to make it because I do have such and such, but I also will make sure that I will have someone to get into my place and get the things done exactly as I would do it. All right. And as we mentioned, also not to disclose anything in terms of the confidentiality and the NDA. So those were, like, some recommended actions to do and others not to do. Here we get to the final part of our slide, which is my main scope of expertise, which is the media interpretation. People would maybe think that media interpretation, it's just as, the same exact thing like the simultaneous, but actually it is not. As we said, media, it's just like a mode of simultaneous interpretation, right? So since it's a mode of simultaneous interpretation, it does have very unique circumstances. So media interpretation, it could happen either simultaneously or also consecutively. And it could happen either on a live streaming or in a recorded audio or video. But mainly today, I will talk about the live streaming media interpretation. What happens in the media interpretation that we get no script and we get no keynote whatsoever. So believe it or not, this is the case. We get neither script nor keynote, especially if we're talking about national TV channels like the one I work for. We usually are concerned with the national security. So under no circumstances that we can have either script or keynote beforehand. Also, the length of the live streaming could last forever. I mean it. I mean, it could just, last for quite a long time with no pauses, no breaks, for a long time. That absolutely would dramatically affect the stamina of the single interpreter if we're having just a single interpreter, not two interpreters. Also, in the media interpretation, the output delivery or the liability of your delivery, it's all on the interpreter shoulder. It's neither on the technicians nor on the speaker. So as you know, that for example, in the conference mode or even in the media, conference mode or in the medical mode, we may say that there was just a problem with the speaker, or there was like a line breaking up, or the coverage was not fine, so on and so forth. But in the live streaming media interpretation, the liability is only on the shoulder of the interpreter, because he is the voice which is announced, so everything will be on his own shoulder, which is absolutely an additional burden, on top of the other challenges. Also, for the media interpretation, there is no place and there's no possibility to stop and just ask, I'm sorry, I couldn't repeat that. I'm sorry, I couldn't hear that. Could you repeat it? Or I'm sorry, did you mean blah, blah, blah? There is no place for this. So it just, you listen, you just hear the sentence or the segment once and for all, and then it's up to you to do it and to put it properly in the target language. Also, being media interpreter means that you will have a process of multi-players. So you have directors, you have technicians, you have lighting and cameras, you have cameramen. So all of those team layers, at the end of the day, they just add additional harden to the quality control of your own output. So if the director have missed something, or if the technician has done something wrong, or if the lighting was not just proper, or if the mentor was not there, or if the master coverage line was not just properly connected, all of those things would just make it harder for you to maintain the competence or the quality or the highest quality of your output. Also, for media interpretation, actually there's no place for mistakes. So you can just do one single mistake, and this could just end the whole story, because it could be sometimes a scandal, either for your own reputation or for your channel reputation. So that's why it is very sensitive to be media interpreter, especially for the live coverage. Very sensitive and very challenging. And as we said, because we do not have even script or keynotes, believe it or not, there is no even preparation time available. Because for us as media interpreters, media staff interpreters, so we just go to like our shift, and then we just announce, you know what, just go ahead right away, you will go live in a couple minutes, and you have no clue even what it's going to be about. You just gonna go and find out once you go live. So there is no even preparation time, and this is an additional burden on the interpreter's shoulder. To make it worse, some TV channels even do not provide very well equipped booths. So you will just find yourself sitting in the studio along with announcers, along with guests, along with cameramen, and you are required to get your interpretation done. And yes, this is real. This is real. This happens on daily routine. So just wanted to give you like some glimpse of the media interpretation that maybe not all of us or maybe not all of you know about it. Some kind of secrets and hidden actions behind the scene that no one knows about it. So that's why I just tried to put it in that way. So I think that here I've come to the end. I've come to the end of my webinar. So thank you so much for being very, very good listeners, and for your paying attention, for your time, and for your participation. And congratulations upfront for the certificates that you would have. And now it's time for questions. I think we still have 10 minutes, Amin or
Yeah.
Carlos.
Well,
Thank you, Dina.
well,
You're most welcome.
at the beginning, thank you so much, Dina. This is really a great presentation. Thank you for this fruitful presentation. We had, during your presentation, we had some comments, some questions, and we're gonna try to read most of them just for the time's sake. So I will start with this first question from Mohammed. Does being a translator or being a translator helps you to be a better interpreter?
Yeah, I do believe in this. I do believe in this very, very profoundly. Yeah, I am from that school that believes that having the translation as a fundamental base would definitely add to your interpretation, you know, proficiency and quality. Because translation, it's like, you know, you put the base, you learn the techniques, you learn the art of conveying messages in another language, and then you take it into the higher level, or like into a higher level, which is the interpretation. So yeah, I do highly recommend, even my you know, my followers and my trainees, I usually recommend them to start with translation first.
Okay. Another question regarding conference interpreting. Sorry. Do conference interpreters need to learn another language? Just hearing you talking about language A or B. So do they need to learn another language?
If you can learn another language, absolutely go ahead and do it. It's an added value. So yes, definitely, if you can learn a third language, this will make you unique. This will get you, you know, into a higher level than your counterparts. So it is not, I mean, it's not, you know, necessary, but if you would do it to have some sort of like additional value or added value, so yes, definitely go ahead and do it. Go ahead and do it. I wish I could do it actually, but I couldn't. So yeah, if there's a place for you to do it, just learn a third language. Yes.
Okay, thank you. And also another question regarding technology. Do we need to keep up with technology, and do technology will replace like interpreters, conference interpreters, court interpreters, or any kind of?
Surely, because as I said, like, you know, before the COVID-19, things were just going into totally different trend, and once COVID-19 got in there, things totally changed to a totally different norm. So as we mentioned, that the interpreters who are just stick to their, you know, traditional experience, and just step back or step away from technology because they get like panic from technology, they actually wouldn't have the same exact level of you know, tasks, or the same exact level of awareness like their counterparts who embrace that technology and try to use it. So yes, absolutely. Being interpreter, as we mentioned, you should be aware with the updates on the service every now and then. So yes.
Okay. And actually,
there is a lot of questions about, are you going to be able to share your PowerPoint? A lot of people, they're asking if you can send the tricks and tips, or are you going to be able to share your PowerPoint?
How much would you pay for this? Yeah, I think yes. No worries. Yeah, I think, yeah, no problem. I can align with Carlos or Amin, or you know, and see how we can do it. Yeah, I have no problem.
Okay, just back to that point of the technology, and there is something that I shared with my colleagues this morning in another webinar. I told them that technology will never replace interpreters. In fact,
exactly,
interpreters who use the technology will replace those who do not use the technology.
Exactly, that's exactly what I mentioned. The same exact thing that I mentioned. Maybe I don't know if you haven't maybe listened to that. So yeah, exactly. I mean, technology would never replace humans, but those interpreters who actually use technology, or who will get themselves well equipped and well educated with technology, will definitely replace both technology and traditional interpreters.
Awesome, understood. And we received a lot of comments just to share with you. So most of attendees here are sharing their thank yous, and they're really glad and happy to be part of your presentation. I don't know if Ingrid and Carlos have questions. Go ahead.
There is one or two more that I have here, Dina. Somebody was asking, and I forgot to write down the name, but he or she is asking, during interpreting, it is preferable to transmit the messages as a first person or third person?
I would say that because you're just, I usually like to say it this way, you're the shadow of the speaker, right? So first person is my preferable style. So that's why I do. That's what I do, because you are just the voice of that speaker. So I prefer to do it in the first person.
And of course, in community interpreting settings, we have some exceptions, like when we're talking for elderly and for children, we have that exceptions. But thank you so much for your comment.
Yeah, absolutely,
And
absolutely.
one more. Somebody was asking, that person didn't understand when you were talking about ignorance with inclusiveness.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sure. This was like one of the tips and tricks that we sometimes use. This happens if you're having, a certain sentence, and that sentence have got lots of description to a situation. For example, we would say that one of those diplomatic leaders have been met by jeers and violence when he visited certain country, for example, right? So your mind couldn't manage to get into the exact interpretation of the word jeers, but actually you just focused on the word violence. And because violence is more like, inclusive to the situation or to the action. So in that case, you can just ignore the word jeers, as long as the interpretation for the word violence will cover it, or will deliver it, you see? So that's what we mean by ignorance, to ignore certain words, as long as they will be included into the interpretation of another word, like umbrella word for the same exact meaning, if that makes sense.
Thank you, Dina. Basant Nassar, he has a question for you, and it's about, it reads the following: for practitioners, for courses and translation diplomas, qualifiers to do the labor market?
No, I didn't get the question, sorry. I didn't just get the whole question. You're saying practitioners and courses and then labor market? I couldn't get that.
Yeah, maybe Basant, can you unmute yourself and ask the question, please? Are you there?
I don't think he can. You will have to find him and unmute him.
Okay. The question is, for practitioners, do courses in translation diplomas qualify us to the labor market?
Sure. Yes, definitely. For practitioners, they should have, qualifications, and those qualifications will be to get trained, to get specialized training in certain mood or in certain field of interpretation, and to have certain working hours or like certain training hours in the interpretation, and by this they can start to get into the market. But other than that, they would never be able to do it. So the recruiters or the event organizers, when they start to search for interpreters, if they find that there is a practitioner, they wouldn't ask him to come and get into the venue unless they have proof stating that this person have gone under certain training or certain diplomat, and that he has certain hours of internship or or working in the field. So yes, absolutely.
Okay. All right, we do have a comment from Maha. I guess she just wanted to say that the language A actually is the mother tongue. Language B is the second language, not the two.
Exactly.
Wishes. Carlos, a lot of questions about how to get the certificate of attendance and also the CEUs, the country education units. Would you share how to get those?
Yes, and we put the email address in the chat window. I know that for some reason it wasn't working for you guys to participate, but you can go into the chat window and look at the messages. Just send us an email to admin@utianet.org, and we will be issuing the certificates in the next couple of weeks. For those who have certifications with either the National Board of Certification for Medical Interpreters or the Certification Commission for Healthcare Interpreters, or the Registry for Interpreters for the Deaf, or the UTIA Interpreting Program, or UTIA Courts, those have been accredited and approved CEUs, so we will include that information in your certificate to ensure that you get credit for those. And just remember that, as UTIA, we provide education webinars and activities throughout the year. So check our website at utianet.org to stay on top of any future events. If you would like to join UTIA, there is information there as well as how to join and participate of additional member benefits and our member directory. And thank you again, everyone, for participating today and being so involved. Dina, it's been a pleasure to have you present, and the information was wonderfully presented. We're very thankful for your
Thank you so
time.
much, Carlos. Thank you so much. Thank you so much indeed. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you so much, Amin. Thank you so much for all the attendees for your time.
And likewise, thank you so much. It has been a pleasure hosting you today. And again, this is fruitful, and I'm pretty sure not only me, but most of us got a lot of information. We thank you so much, and we hope that you will present for us in the future another time. Thank you. And thank you, everybody.
Absolutely, I will.
I have
Thank
one
you.
more question before we let everybody go. Carlos, were
yeah,
we
sure.
recording the webinar? Can people go and take a look at the UTIA website, or?
Yes, it will be available for UTIA members under the membership profile. So if you're a UTIA member, or if you would like to join UTIA, you'll have access to the recording.
Thank you so much, Carlos, for that information. Thank you, everybody. And thank you, Dina. Everybody was saying thank you so much for all that information. You did a great presentation. We had a lot of comments, really good comments about your presentation. Thank you so much, everybody. And see you next time.
Thank you all. Thank you, guys. Best of luck to everyone. Thank you.
Stay safe. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Cheers. Bye-bye.